You are listening to Faithless Brewing, a Magic the Gathering podcast for the Spike Rogue. Each week we design new decks for tournament play. We put our creations to the test and share our findings on the air. Coming up on the Brew session, Unctus Grand Metatect is an explosive artifact lore that is bursting with potential. It pumps your team, draws a million cards, and sets up infinite combos. Join us as we plunge deep into the Metaverse today on Faithless Brewing. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Faithless Brewing Podcast. I am David Robertson, coming to you live from the Twin Cities, and I am joined by the CEO of the Faithless Brewing Podcast himself. He is Dr. Daniel Shriver. Mr. Shriver, what is going on?
Doing great, David. How are you?
I'm well. I'm excited to talk about a little brewing. We've got a sweet card this week and a possibly sweet card from last week that had some travails. Had some struggles. The struggle is real.
I am unreasonably excited about the card that we're brewing around this week, and I don't know how I ended up in this place, because you initially tried to pitch me on this like during spoiler week for Phyrexia All Will Be One, and I kind of groaned like, oh, come on, like, not this. This doesn't look good. This looks like very ticky-tacky marginal, but, you know, it's the exact kind of card that is catnip to a brewer like David. So you sent me some lists and I looked at them and I tried to like understand what exactly they were doing, and it got its hooks in me at that point, and it's just been sort of rattling around at the back of my mind ever since. Haven't gotten into it until just now, what is shaping up to be the end of Phyrexia season, but I think this is one of the most exciting cards, having seen how things played out.
Yeah. So before we get into that, we just need to do a little housekeeping at the top. Just a reminder, if you're enjoying the show, you'd like to support us, the best way to do that is to go to patreon.com/faithlessbrewing and join up at any level that you feel comfortable in. You get access to the Discord. You get access to some swag. You get to vote on the card of the month. The monthly project was Malcator. This is one of the most successful brew targets we've had. I think, you had a gentleman's 8-2 with this card. I think you made a bunch of improvements to sort of a rough shell that I had proposed, including adding some of our card of the week here, Unctus.
Yes. Which
looked super smooth. Just having a bunch of bodies to pump is nice. So yeah, the Malcator brewing continues unfettered. I have not played the deck myself because you got so many reps in, but it looked awesome. I mean, it looked exactly like we drew it up, right?
Yeah, I'm having a great time playing Malcator, and I will probably run it back one or two more times before the month is done. So yeah, always great to see like the community sort of come together and put the work in on a card. We haven't gotten that 5-0 yet. We're still working on it, but who knows? Maybe it's you. Maybe you're the one who will come up with the next great 5-0.
Yeah, I think outside of the limits of this podcast, we've kind of been on a nice run, like brewing a bunch of type of decks that no one else in the format is even talking about. And I think we've just been like 4-1s, 3-2s, 4-1s up and down the block. So hopefully this continues with Unctus, the Grand Metatect. And if you'd like to hear more about it, of course, Discord, patreon.com/faithlessbrewing is the place to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Great community there. And of course, just a nice way to give back to the show if we're bringing you some joy. All right.
So Unctus Grand Metatect has a lot of text.
You love to see it.
It gives you a lot. It offers you multiple forking paths, as we say. You can choose to exploit multiple of the pieces of text here. So read it off to us, Daniel.
1 blue, legendary artifact creature Phyrexian Vidalcan. There's so much going on, they had to like break out the small font, scrunch up the creature types.
Yep.
You get a 2/4 creature. So 1 blue, 2/4 legendary artifact creature with the following lines of text. Number 1. Other blue creatures you control have Whenever this creature becomes tapped, draw a card, then discard a card, what we call looting colloquially. Number 2, other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1. So the first ability boosted your blue creatures, the second ability boosts your artifact creatures. And if you have a creature that is both blue and artifact, it gets both of those bonuses. What if you have a creature that does not belong to those categories? Well, then you might want Unctus's third ability. This is an activated ability. It costs a blue Phyrexian mana, meaning you pay it with either a blue mana or with 2 life. When you do so, until end of turn, target creature you control becomes a blue artifact in addition to its other types and colors. Activate this only as a sorcery. So that means you cannot give a surprise +1/+1 boost at instant speed to a creature. But you can, if it's your turn, you're about to go to combat, and you would like to juice up some of your random creatures, you can either pay mana or life, or some combination of those, to give them the Unctus boost, the Unctus bump, we might call it.
And if you need to lose life, it can target itself.
That's true, right? The bonuses apply to other creatures, but this ability can target Unctus itself, which shouldn't matter until suddenly it does. I have like a Death Shadow list that I'll be trying to sell you on.
Right, yeah, I thought it was a super cool idea. So yeah, we will definitely try to even exploit that. Even the third piece of text, very relevant.
All right, so that's all of the rules text. Any details of the card we should be aware of here, David?
Well, I think the reason why maybe you were apprehensive about the card or I was interested in it is it kind of offers you 2 different lord effects that you've outlined, right? Is it a lord in the sense that if you have a bunch of artifact creatures, this just pumps them, right? It's just a 3-mana lord with a bonus to the power and toughness that is relevant, and then kind of an extra bonus, right? You can make them blue, or some artifacts are blue by themselves. Or is it the second text you're interested in? You want the blue creatures that are tapping for various reasons. There's blue creatures that tap to untap other things. Are you just trying to generate the looting ability? Are you getting value out of your graveyard? Or are you getting value out of the second draw of the turn? Are you looking for a combo piece? Or are you trying to do all those things? So you have to kind of decide in each deck like how you're trying to make use of this card.
Exactly. The draw discard ability, the looting ability, that just opens up so much space, and it's almost like you almost wish it was not so open-ended because you have to consider all of it, like graveyard shenanigans, drawing shenanigans. I think, David, you've always been attracted to things that trigger when you draw multiple cards in a turn. This works with recursion, it works with unearth, it works with Emry, it works with all kinds of stuff. So that's the blue half, but that ability does not tell you how to tap the creature. So that's kind of part of the puzzle you have to solve, right? Do you want to just do it through the combat step, right? Choose creatures that are very good at attacking and not dying? Do you want to specifically seek out creatures that have a tap ability, like Emry? And if that's the case, now you're actually starting to overlap with a card like Tyvar Jubilant Brawler, which was our first card from this season. Maybe there's some cross synergies there. Maybe there's some combo potential, like there are a couple of cards that can actually tap and untap repeatedly. I had a brief moment of madness where I thought that Seeker of Skybreak was a modern legal card, that's a creature that can just untap itself over and over again. It's not, because if it were, that would be broken already. But you can approximate that by like having 2 copies of Fatestitcher, for example, in Modern. Or in Pioneer, you can do it with the card Kiora's Follower. These card creatures that just tap to untap another creature. With 2 Kiora's Followers in play, you can just repeatedly do that over and over again, and Unctus will trigger every time you're doing that. So can you profit off that some way? So a lot of stuff going on with that draw discard trigger, and you have to decide like which of these is more important and how does that interact with what we can call the beatdown plan of just making a large board and giving it +1/+1.
Yeah, and man, it's like, how much do you want to lean into one? How much do you want to lean into the other? Your deck still has to be functional. This is only a 4 of, and at least in Pioneer, there aren't replicative effects. So you need to be very careful that your deck, if it needs specifically this card to win, has to be make sure it's always in play, or you have a way to search for it or whatever. So that's another thing to think about.
All right, so if it's all right with you, David, I'd like to just sort of highlight some categories of useful synergy, and maybe you can tell me like which cards here stand out to you as ones to focus on?
Sure.
So just focusing on looting, doing stuff with the graveyard and with looting. I mentioned the unearth mechanic. We can throw in the disturb mechanic there. I mentioned cards like Emry, Lurker of the Lock, or just anything that triggers when you draw and discard. Are there any cards in this space that you think are particularly good with Unctus?
I do think Ovalchase Daredevil is very good. If you have a bunch of ways to loot, you can turn the Daredevil into real cards as long as you're casting artifacts. I do think that Emry's very good as well, right? If you're hopefully casting Emry on turn 2 into Unctus, the tap of the Emry, you don't get to target the next card that you loot, but you do keep a flow of cards going to your graveyard. So if there's specific cards you're looking for Emry to find, they work well together.
I know you're not the biggest fan of Emry, but I found this to be like such a powerful combination in like the Malcator deck. Emry digs you 4 cards, picks up any number of combat couriers, for example, but it also just finds Unctus. You said it's a 4 of, it's a unique effect, but it is an artifact. So
yeah,
it's eligible to be grabbed off something like an Ingenious Smith or something like an Emry or a Gluttonous Crane if you are a glutton for punishment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like possible to like find Unctus itself within this self-mill recursion space.
Yeah, the cards I don't like are the aggressive cards. I don't like a card like Scrapheap Scrounger or Razorlash Transmogrant because your deck is not inherently aggressive, and like farting around and then generating quote-unquote value with these cards is going to put you way too far behind, specifically in Pioneer. Like you'll be slower than the aggro decks and you won't be able to set up your engine against the other mid-range or controller combo decks.
Oh, that's too bad. I kind of like the Scrapheap Scrounger. I would love to just have a 4/3 recursive threat. But I guess I see what you mean.
Well, I think you can play it. I just like you don't want to be doing Scrapheap Scrounger plus Emry things. You want to like
I see
1-drop aggro creature, 2-drop Scrapheap Scrounger, 3-drop. Okay, that's fine, right? And maybe then you get to play like Thoughtseize and stuff like that. And then maybe you can use your 2/4 guy so your attacking creatures sort of function like Fable does, where you loot away your Thoughtseize against aggro and you loot away your push against control. Like that seems reasonable. That's like a reasonable shell.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So I talked about this last week when I was talking about some of our Malcator results so far. I really, really liked how Unctus makes Combat Courier a 2/2 haste creature. We tend to think of Combat Courier as like try to like make sure we can crack it for a clue, but I was dealing a lot of damage with Combat Couriers, and it made me think that, these new unearthed artifacts might be worth a pretty close look with Unctus. Like Scrapwork Mutt, if that comes back as a 3/2 haste, is actually dealing a good chunk of damage. Phyrexian Dragon Engine, we haven't really seen much of that card. I think I was wrong about how played it would be, but if that's a 3/3 double strike, it's a lot more interesting. And I'm even willing to entertain, like, there's a comment, it's like another draft comment. It's called Scrapwork Cohort.
Oh, let me look it up.
It's one of the top performing commons from Brothers War Draft, according to 17 Lands. It's a 3/1 that brings an artifact token when it comes into play, but it unearths for 3. So like there again, that's unearthing for 6 power, 4 of it with haste. So maybe there's something there in the more aggressive slant.
Yeah, could be. I mean, to your point, because this card is so open-ended, it's like the variety of things you can do with it is super wide. So even once you decide like which part of it you're going to explore, then you have to decide like what colors am I going to pair it with? And then after you decide that, you have to decide, okay, then which specific cards, like all these cards you're naming are at least worth considering. Even the Scrapwork Cohort, 4 mana is probably too much. But that's not like insane, right? Like because the 2 bodies getting buffed by a lord and then the ability to come back and then leave a permanent 1/1 when it comes back is like not trivial. You could certainly imagine like one of them in like a Malcator list just to get milled away and then to come back for 3.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so that's some graveyard stuff that might work with Unctus. Shifting gears entirely, what about blue creatures that tap? Or we could say any creature that self-taps, because if it's not blue and you really like it, you can just make it blue with Unctus. Then you're going to get that bonus draw discard every time you tap it. We've mentioned Emry, of course, but are there any other cards here that stand out to you?
I was thinking about like a Vantress Gargoyle Kiora type of list, and I wasn't really sure what was happening there. Like with Treasure Cruise, I don't know. Like you just get lost in the sauce with some of this stuff, but that actually seemed like pretty good to me. That like Phoenix isn't really a deck anymore. You can kind of just mill your opponent willy nilly. It doesn't help them that much. Like Red Black plays one Croxa. It's like that who cares? And everyone else you can just mill with impunity and maybe not Parhelion. And then like with Treasure Cruise, in theory, you can always like block with Vantress Gargoyle.
That would be a dream. We did not do much attacking and blocking during our Vantress Gargoyle week.
No, we did not. But I mean, if you think about Vantress Gargoyle milling you each for one and then like looting, you are filling your graveyard like at an insane rate. With Unctus and then like maybe a Kiora in play, so you're just like milling like 6 cards a turn or something crazy.
It's a 2-mana 5/4 that becomes a 2-mana 6/5 under Unctus. Does that help us? Like fight rigging or Great Henge or something?
Yeah, you could do that stuff. I don't know why you're doing it that way and not a different way, but
all right. Fair enough. All right, so those are some self-tapping creatures. Other ones like Hangerback Walker, like Steel Overseer. I see you've got some concepts drawn up for those, so we'll see them again. You don't have to choose creatures that have the tap ability. There are other ways to tap things for profit, and these will all work great with Unctus as well. Convoke, Improvise, Crewing a Vehicle, using a Springleaf Drum. Anything in this space. I mean, there's a bunch of cards that fall in this category, but I mean, some of these are pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, Moonsnare, Prototype, Springleaf Drum, these have been cards we've experimented with in Pioneer. There haven't actually been that many decks that have like Moonsnare Prototype in them that have had any success, which is really interesting. That's still space to think about. You know, Smuggler's Copter in Modern is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's always kind of just looking for a way to abuse it. Getting to attack as a 4/4, so it lives through Bolt is actually like really interesting. And then like you can double loot if you want, which is also like, again, like your selection is just getting insane.
You'd highlighted the Omen Keel as perhaps a Pioneer legal card we should consider for this crew interaction with Unctus. The Omen Keel is the backside of Cosima, God of the Voyage. Not really a useful effect, but I mean, this hits hard. It's a blue creature, so it's going to hit as a 4/4. If it hits them, which it probably will, you're going to get some number of lands, which may not seem that useful, but if you have all these free lands from your opponent, then you're freed up to like loot away your own lands. It might be kind of good, actually.
Yeah, it seems silly, but that specific interaction is so good. Even honestly, the submersible, the blue 2/3
oh god
vehicle, it's crew 2. So the same curve that into Unctus is actually really good. So it crews it up, it makes it a 3/4, and that actually just straight up draws a card. So
oh wow,
you can decide how into that you want to get, but those are both like it seems kind of silly to say it, but like that curve is actually really good.
I kind of forgot that this was a straight up clean draw. Okay.
I remembered.
Key technology in the war against Nicol Bolas, the Silent Submersible. In the improvised space, we know Metallic Rebuke is good. Metallic Rebuke that stops their combo and loots you once or twice is extremely attractive. Maverick Thopterist stands out to me as one that's like kind of on the cusp of playability, but it adds a bunch of bodies to the board, 2 of which are artifact creatures with flying. And those become 2/2 flyers with Unctus, and I'm kind of curious like if that's secretly great. It gives you the bonus when you cast it, you convoke, you improvise rather, I should say. Tapping your Silver Ravens, or who knows what you're tapping, get some loots that way, and then it just adds a ton of bodies to the board.
Yeah, that's a card that it was kind of a miss for me. It wasn't really on my radar, but yeah, what you're like outlining sounds very interesting. That sounds pretty good.
All right, so plenty to consider in this tapping for profit space. Of course, the cleanest way to do this is to just play a creature and attack with it. So any good creature that can attack unfettered is going to be beneficial with Unctus. It doesn't even have to be blue. It can be anything you want. You can just pay the Phyrexian mana to make it a blue artifact. But we're going to get paid off the most for having specifically blue artifact creatures, or just artifact creatures. What do you like in this category?
None of these cards listed look very good to me. Rabid Battery, I guess. Bomat Courier. These are cards that have seen some play and can be kind of part of like aggressive draws. But in general, like, I think Unctus itself on straight power level is actually more of a synergy piece than a powerful card.
Mm-hmm.
So I get a little bit worried when we're playing other cards that are only really good when we have Unctus in play, right? Like, I am very allergic to playing cards like Ornithopter in with decks like this.
You mentioned Rapid Battery. There was a Izzet Mind Link mech deck that I think you've been messing around with kind of in the back of our heads for a while. It played Lizard Blades, and that was always one of the cards that I felt like underperformed. But a 2/2 double strike is a lot more attractive to me than a 1/1 double strike. And I'm kind of curious if like that's actually worth looking at again now that Unctus is in the mix.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that, but it's interesting because Unctus also pumps the vehicle, which is a blue creature when it becomes equipped. Yeah. So it's actually a 5-power double striker if it copies Lizard Blade, which is actually really matters if you think about like how the numbers add up. It's lethal in 2 attacks, which is really actually quite interesting. Also, if you do the double giant thing, it actually just kills them now with Unctus in play.
So the combo you're talking about is Calamity Bearer crewing to copy the Mind Link mech, gives you like a double effect on your damage.
Right. So if you also have Unctus, I know the curve doesn't quite work because we're talking about 3-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, but with those 3 cards in play, it just attacks for 20. It's not doing most of the life loss to them, it's just killing them.
I like that. Yeah. All right, so there's tons of stuff that just like plays in this space. I love it. I've got a list that I'm going to propose that is focused on network disruptor. So just fair warning, we're not out of the woods on draft commons yet, but I think this is
just start looking them up right now, folks. you don't have to know what these cards do.
Extremely powerful, broken card, especially with Unctus. 1/1 flying artifact creature. When it comes into play, it taps any permanent, which can disrupt the opponent, tap a blocker, tap a land. It can also just tap itself if you just need a loot. And I think that's actually going to be very, very good with Unctus, although I have not tried this yet. So little things like that could be very interesting.
Well, the fact that this card loots is why I was surprised you didn't love it when it was printed, because it just loots all the time. And it's just moving card. Again, we're not going up cards. That's key. Well, we are moving cards from one zone to another, which is the Dan Shriver special.
Well, Network Disruptor does not itself loot. It only loots because Unctus.
But my point is Unctus itself is an engine that doesn't put you up any cards. It just moves cards all over the place. So this is your wheelhouse.
No, you were right. You were right. I think the issue was like it was too much text for me to process, so I couldn't see the light.
It's like Moby Dick. It's like, all right, at first I think it's really about whaling, and then there's actually all this like homoerotic subtext, and now I can appreciate it as like the great American novel.
Exactly. Yeah. So other stuff you might explore, right? If you don't like these crappy little creatures, maybe you want to go wide and use it as just a lord for all your artifacts. So cards that spit artifact tokens into play. There's a bunch of artifact tokens. There's Servos, Thopters, Phyrexian Mites, Constructs, Mirror. Any card that generates a bunch of these will profit handsomely when Unctus is in play. Unctus is a legend, so Mox Amber becomes very good. I talked about this in the Malcator results so far. There's synergy with paying Phyrexian mana for life loss. I have a list drawn up that's focused entirely on that. And it's even possible to use Unctus to trigger like a draw 2 synergy, right? There's this card, Thopter Mechanic, which I know you really like, and you're going to tell us about that, I think, in our first deck list. So tons of stuff you could explore. Anything you want to say about these, David, before we jump into the lists?
Yeah, I mean, I think each of them is worth exploring, and I think it's also really important the first time we try these lists, or anyone in the Discord that is brave enough to try these lists, don't focus on the results, because the results might not be good, but focus on what feels good. Like, does a curve of whatever, 1 drop into Thopter Mechanic into Unctus, does that feel powerful enough that they actually have to stop developing their plan and interact with you That's my number one thing. If I'm trying to play out an aggro shell, is my best draw forcing them to stop just playing their creature, and they have to interact with my plan. And that's like the big symbol to me that I don't have to play Elite Disruption. If you have to play Elite Disruption, that leads you down. We know what the best disruptive cards are, right? And then that kind of is a little more of a gated path. So Unctus, in theory, is providing us with the ability to stabilize on the ground and provide all this card selection and perhaps, value. And then you just have to see how those cards play out. So it may be that each individual shell performs poorly, but we see like, okay, Thopter mechanic actually isn't good enough, but the life loss mechanic is really good enough. How can we tweak those shells, or whatever, like we said, there's 50 different ways you can approach it. The few of these paths won't quite be worth pursuing. Some of them will be, but the results might be bad, and you'll just have to incorporate the stuff you learn from the other lists, etc.
Yeah, great advice. So with that in mind, don't focus on the results because we're not going to get many wins. Let's roll up with Thopter mechanic. Tell me about this Izzet list.
All right, so this list is playing a bunch of 2-drops. So you have Thopter mechanic, 4 Renowned Weaponsmith, 4 Scrapwork Mutt, 4 Hangerback Walker, 4 Combat Courier, 4 Voltage Surge. And then our 3-drops are Unctus and Thopter Engineer. And then we have some 5-drops that Renowned Weaponsmith can ramp us to, which is Skitterbeam Battalion and then a single Forsaken Monument.
Remind me what those cards do.
Okay, which ones?
The 5-drop, Skitterbeam and Forsaken Monument.
Skitterbeam Battalion is a 9-mana artifact that makes a 4/4 trample haste artifact creature. And if it's cast from your hand, when it comes into play, you get 2 copies of it. So if you pay 9 mana, you get 3 4/4 trample haste creatures. And if you pay 5 mana specifically for it, you get 3 2/2 creatures. That's a prototype cost. Each of them is red if you cast it for prototype, but it is still an artifact creature. So you could curve out to play Renowned Weaponsmith on 2, Skitterbeam Battalion on 3, attack for 6, play Unctus on 4, and all those 2/2s become 3s, and you can make your Renowned Weapons with an artifact if you like, and you can attack for 9 plus 2 is 11. So just that is 17 damage on turn 4 if you're not disrupted with an insane amount of looting if you like. And that's not counting a 1-drop. You could have played a Combat Courier or whatever.
So Renowned Weaponsmith is potentially so explosive, and this is a card that I've only really seen you trying to take advantage of it.
Yeah, so it's interesting in multiple ways. One, it naturally taps. So we go Renowned Weaponsmith into Unctus, and then Renowned Weaponsmith can play another artifact, right? It can play a Scrapwork Mutt, it can play a Hangerback Walker, it can play a Combat Courier, and then it taps, it loots. So you can loot away your Ovalchase Daredevil, you can loot away your Voltage Surge if you're not playing against a deck that cares about that. And then in those draws where you don't have Renowned Weaponsmith against like removal heavy decks, you're hoping to play Thopter mechanic. Now this is a card that we didn't even talk about during spoiler season. It's very interesting. 1 blue, 2/1. Whenever you draw your second card for the turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And when it dies, you get a 1/1 Thopter. So just a natural curve of turn 2 Thopter mechanic, turn 3 Unctus. You can turn mechanic into an artifact if you like. You can attack for 4 and you get a loot. And then it's also resistant to removal. So, okay, your opponent fatal pushes it. You just get a Thopter, and the Thopter is buffed naturally by Unctus. So that is very interesting to me. Scrapwork Mutt is like an extra draw trigger for the mechanic because we don't want to just rely on our Unctus. Thopter Engineer, I think, is just generally like reasonable. You should consider it in all these Unctus builds. It does grant haste to artifacts. You could say, well, our Skitterbeam already has haste. It gives haste to Unctus. You can make anything an artifact with Unctus itself. So you can give haste to an Ovalchase Daredevil if you choose to cast it, or a Combat Courier, or a Hangerback Walker. Yeah, so it's kind of similar to some of the shell I proposed before. And then again, of course, you also have the Voltage Surge sacrificing Hangerback Walker to make, a couple Thopters, and then let's say they all have haste with Thopter Engineer. So your deck is like resistant to removal because you have like Skitterbeam Scourge, Hangerback Walker, Thopter mechanic. And then you also have like kind of nut draws where you are actually able to kill your opponent quite fast, which is useful against some of the unfair matchups because we don't have Disruption main deck.
Yeah, I feel like the deck is half aggressive, or it's kind of like a slow developing aggro deck. Like if you specifically start on a Weaponsmith, then you can just explode with the Skitterbeam Battalion line. But the other curve, right, the Thopter mechanic into Unctus, it feels solid but mid-range, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
They can just take the damage and continue with their plan. And I'm a little bit worried about the Thopter mechanic getting caught in that space. Or maybe the mechanic is fine, but it's the combination of mechanic plus like a hangerback walker. We end up having not that many turn 1 plays and like a lot of turn 2 plays. And I wonder if we should just rejigger the curve and just like get another 1 mana threat that we're happy with so that we're just on the board more when Unctus comes down.
Yeah, I could certainly see, to your point earlier, Bomat Courier as a possibility.
I like that.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's obviously lots of cards to cut. Do you even need the Ovalchase Daredevil? Do you want the Hangerback Walker? In theory, I kind of like having the deck be bifurcated because when you're looting, you like pick the half you like where it matters. But it might just take too long to develop, to your point.
Unctus is unfortunately the only looter in this shell. I guess the Scrapwork Mutt is a looter, so that's not true.
Scrapwork Mutt.
But yeah, maybe that's like not quite enough for Ovalchase. Maybe like a single Phyrexian Dragon Engine is like a better use of that slot because that like hits harder. I could imagine just killing someone with that, and then I can definitely get the Unearth later. There's stuff here to play with for sure.
Yeah, and then I have a bunch of cards on the side. So I have Silent Submersible, we mentioned that earlier. Cosima, again, a 1 of Cosima you should probably consider in any deck with Unctus, honestly. Unlicensed Hearse, Reckoner Bankbuster as a possible main deck card. Again, if you want to go like all in on the Renowned Weaponsmith, it helps you turn your Bankbuster into cards very easily. It also helps crew Bankbuster. You know, you have all these little creatures running around, but they're actually powered up. Shrapnel Blast, again, it's just like a finisher. Maybe if you want to go all in on the Hangerback Walker, you could play like 4 Thopter Engineers. Really just try to maximize your damage. Maybe don't play any ramp. Like you could cut the Renowned Weaponsmith Skitterbeam package and play like all cheaper creatures with 4 Shrapnel Blast. So there's just a ton of different ways you could do this. But so these are just all cards to consider. But I take your point about curve considerations. It might be that we need to kind of like pick our path and lean more into like 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop with no ramp, and then maybe like more of a ramp centric build.
Yeah, maybe this is where we could try out that Maverick Thopterist as kind of it's like a curve topper that can also come down early.
Yeah.
That requires having a little more artifact creatures because you do need actual artifacts to improvise, and the mechanic is not that. So not totally sure. I mean, I actually kind of like Enthusiastic Mechanaut, 2/2 flyer that is an artifact creature that reduces your artifacts by 1. I don't know if you've been tempted by that in the past.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's interesting.
Emry makes sense here too. I know you don't like Emry, but even if all Emry does is mill 4 cards and die, that still could have milled multiple Scrapwork Mutts and Combat Couriers. There's a lot to consider. I mean, in the Izzet space, Izzet creatures that are artifacts, there's so many cards to consider here.
Yeah, I do think just generally my sense is in a red-blue list and Izzet list, you want to have a way to close the show, like where you are putting a bunch of power in play to kill them. So if you want to lean in on the Renowned Weaponsmith, Skitterbeam thing, or if the Thopter mechanic, like you want to be able to attack for 4 or 5 damage, like on turn 3 a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, and I think that Thopter Engineer giving haste to anything with Unctus, that's super slick. That's a great find. Yeah.
All right, next up, you had success with a blue-white Malcator list, and you started playing around with some of the flex slots. So this is going like all the way in on Unctus. So there's 4 Unctus here. I kept a lot of the tech that you like. So the Skrelvs, I kept some Emrys. I know you like them. But now actually Serval Exhibition seems really interesting to me because Serval Exhibition before in some of the like black-white lists I was proposing with Malcator was just there to help us trigger Malcator. But if we have a Lord, Serval Exhibition is actually an interesting curve, right? Turn 2 Exhibition, turn 3 Unctus. You can make them both blue if you want to double loot. But it just lets you attack for 4. And it can trigger Malcator, and Serval Exhibition can trigger Ingenious Smith. And same for Stram's Expertise. It's not just a card that works with Malcator. The 3/1/1s actually matter quite a bit with Unctus. So it's and it may be that the shell you had, and maybe just adding like another Unctus and not going all in on some of these more speculative cards is just better. But at least something to consider in terms of, now that you have this Lord, you can kind of like go all in on the Malcator and all in on the Unctus in the same way. But the individual card qualities may be slightly lower.
So 1 mana, Portable Hole, Combat Courier, and Skrelv, 4, 4, and 3. At 2 mana, Ingenious Smith, Patchwork Automaton, Servo Exhibition, 4 copies of each, 2 copies of Emry, 3 Mox Amber. At 3 mana, you have 4 copies of Malcator and 4 Unctus, and then the Curve Topper is Fram's Expertise, 2 copies. Keeping the 22 land shell, of which 4 of those are artifact lands that the Smith can find. So I talked to Lawson about this Malcator concept when we were at the Hunter Burton, and he's been like playing around with it. We've switched the Darksteel Citadels for Treasure Vaults because that actually has come up a few times since then, that since we no longer care about Indestructible, just getting treasures actually triggers Malcator pretty easily in the mid-game. So that's one change. And I'm curious if, like, you know, that draft common that we were talking about, the 3-1 Unearth, maybe that's just like better than Fram's Expertise here. Is that possible?
It's possible. If you go all in on Emry, it might be a little better, where it's just like a value card to be milled.
Yeah, I mean, I do love Emry. The card that I would like to maybe cut to make room for some of this is the Patchwork Automaton. Like, there are some matchups where it's great and others where it's just like doesn't do anything. And if I'm adding in more cards like Servo Exhibition that are not going to trigger the Automaton, I'm just like ready to cut it. I don't know if you would agree with that or not.
Yeah, I mean, you've played this list, I haven't. We still have a lot of artifacts in this list. Automaton gets even better with Unctus, so it's like harder to cut because its base power is higher. Like just Patchwork Automaton into Unctus is a 3-power creature that is very hard to target for our opponent. So, or Patchwork Automaton into Mox Amber into Unctus into another spell is, you know, a 5-power creature that is very difficult to target on turn 3. That we can make loot for us. So
that's true.
I think this card's very good. You've historically liked it less than me. And again, you've played at least the original version of this list, and it might be that the original version of the list with like 3 Unctus is just like the right level. Like, I did not like the Oswald like package that you added. It just that seemed way too clunky. So maybe just like the 3rd Unctus, and maybe like I was thinking we should maybe just play like one of the improvised counter spells that we can always like loot to try to find if we're like way ahead to like stop the wrath or whatever. Like just have one main deck that we can like search for almost. When you had a bunch of great screenshots of you like looting 3 or 4 times.
Which card were you talking about? The
improvised mana leak.
Oh, the Metallic Rebuke.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Or even like if you're playing Unctus and Malcator, maybe you can just play Stubborn Denial if you think you'll have like a 4-power creature or reasonable enough amount all the time. Like just as a one of like in the main deck that we can find if we need to. And, you know, we, of course, when it's terrible, we just loot it away. Like it'd just be cool to have like one of those in the deck, because, you know, a lot of your screenshots are like, all right, as long as they don't sweep the next turn, I basically win. And we get like 5 looks at something. It'd just be cool to have like one card, like, you know, still had all these kind of insurance policy.
Another card that Lawson was messing around with, and this would directly compete with Servo Exhibition, is the White Puzzle Knot, which sucks, right? It's 2 mana, it makes the 1/1 Servo, but it is an artifact, so that's 2 artifacts again for the Malcator.
Yeah.
And then if you just like draw that, and it's any turn after turn 4, it immediately can be sacrificed for the 3rd artifact.
Oh, that's cool. I could see that being better than Fram's Expertise.
Yeah, something to consider. I don't know for sure yet if that's actually good enough.
Yeah, again, like all this stuff is pretty clunky, right? Like the whole point is Malcator doesn't need to make an extra thing to be on the level, especially if you have Unctus buffing both halves. That's already just making this card like very reasonable because it has 2 bodies. So maybe we don't need to bend that far, and we just need a little bit more interaction.
That's true. Yeah, more interaction. Or I'm like more power. Like we just squeeze the Venerated Loxodon, the Elephant Lord, in here.
Yeah, it could be. Could be.
Elephant Tribal with Malcator and Venerated Loxodon. This is the key.
But I mean, this is space that we at least have confidence in. You know, I think you had a lot of success with the blue-white build. adding Unctus was better in the kind of final form, especially because it itself is an artifact. I think you had 2x in your list that felt very good. So we know we don't have to play 4 Unctus. We know at least 2 is very reasonable. Maybe the 3rd is very great, And so that the shell is already something we've got some faith in there, right? That it felt good. It was having results against a wide variety of the format. So tweaking the cards, I think exactly what Lawson's doing. Like a bunch of random cards have uses because if you're putting multiple artifacts in play, it just is better than you would think with Unctus.
Right.
There's a 4 mana thing that makes like 2 servos and like as a dwarf. We already talked about you could play the 5 mana 2/1 that gives all your creatures +1/+1 and makes 2 servos. And his lifelink, like these are actually reasonable cards to play as like one of like on the top end of your curve. So
I kind of like Whirler Rogue. That's 2 blue for a 2/2.
Whirler Rogue, another great one.
Brings 2 Thopters, and it allows you to just tap 2 artifacts whenever you want to give things unblockable.
And give things unblockable. Like, so that plus Skrelv means like you can probably just get in for 8 damage, right? If you've got 2 golems lying around.
Yeah, and loot as many times as you want when you do that. So.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, lots to play with in blue-white. This next one here is taking us into Sultai colors for a pretty cool deck that you had almost 5-0'd with.
Yeah, had multiple draws to win the 2 matches I lost. So every the 2 matches I lost went to 3 games. The 3 I won were 2-0. The deck actually felt weirdly good. So the plan here is we have our common shell here of 2 drops. We have Renowned Weaponsmith, Hangerback Walker, Steel Overseer, Patchwork Automaton. We're pairing this with black, so we actually have the best interaction in the format. Thoughtseize, push. The Renowned Weaponsmith lets us cast, Steel Overseer, Hangerback Walker, Patchwork Automaton, but we're also going up the curve to cast. We have 4 Chariot, 1 Sky Sovereign. I was playing a bunch of Emrys. The card just felt really weak in the shell because I had Tyvar. I thought it would at least be okay. And then Tyvar is actually awesome. Tyvar, like, get back, Steel Overseer. Steel Overseer can activate itself right away. Unctus can actually make anything an artifact. So if you have the life, Steel Overseer is just like tapping to give your entire board.
Oh, geez.
So like I'm outlining a line here. You could play turn 2 Steel Overseer, turn 3 Unctus, play Hangerback Walker on 0, but Unctus keeps it alive because it's giving artifact creatures +1/+1. Then you tap Steel Overseer and it buffs Unctus as an artifact already, pumps up your Hangerback Walker and pumps your Steel Overseer. You can make it blue if you want to loot. And then if you like play a Tyvar next turn, you just like tap your Steel Overseer multiple times. You can tap your Hangerback Walker multiple times. It's just crazy some of the things you can do. So I basically took my shell before, which had all this. They was playing like 3 Emrys. I cut 2 Emrys, added 3 Unctus. I cut a few other random cards. I can't remember what they were. I even found room for another Thoughtseize. I'd have to look at my original list to see what I'm replacing, but still left 1 Emry in. It's fine. I even added a Chief Engineer just to try to help us cast like Chariot on turn 3 more often. And 1 Chief Engineer is actually really good, I think, just to have around. It just lets everything tap, quote unquote, with haste. If you have an Unctus in play.
Yeah. Love that with Unctus.
Like you can play Chief Engineer, Unctus, tap them both, loot, play Patchwork Automaton or Steel Overseer.
So when we first looked at Unctus, I thought that Chief Engineer was going to be like a must, right? Because that's how you combo with Unctus, Chief Engineer, and Ovalchase Daredevil. You just stroll through your deck. But that's probably not good enough, but it doesn't mean you can't incorporate a little bit of that into certain shells. So I think like having small numbers of Engineer makes total sense.
Yeah, I've hated every time I've drawn a second Engineer. I've been so mad in various shells I've tried, but the first one's always pretty sweet. So, just make sure you don't ever draw the second one.
Exactly. And it's interesting that even if you don't like Emry, Tyvar can still be very good. And Tyvar takes full advantage of the looting on Unctus. Like Tyvar, when you actually know what you're going to get back before you mill 3, like it's extremely, extremely powerful. So that's another little place where the bonus loot from Unctus is more than just an incidental filtering.
Also, possibly relevant, but like Unctus pumps your Chariot, so your Chariot like wins Chariot battles. Can't actually be profitably blocked by Bone Crusher Giant, things like that. So it can pump both cats. Like again, you have to have the life to do all this stuff, but you can do some crazy stuff like play Chariot. Unctus turns both cats into artifacts. Crew up Chariot, tap Steel Overseer, pump everything.
Yeah, and keep in mind, you don't have to have life. You can just spend blue mana as well. So if it's the mid game,
I'm paying life.
Okay. Or you can also pay life.
Pay the iron cost, baby.
Sure. All right, so excited to see if these changes can get this deck over the finish line. We're so close to that 5-0 with it already.
Yes. All right, and then the final one is like all in on combo. So this deck has 4 Emry. This deck has 4 Paradox Engine, 4 Renowned Weaponsmith, 4 Ingenious Smith. So similar shell to kind of like the blue-white Malcator shell, but instead of having like creatures that can attack and block, we are just trying to set up Paradise Engine loops. Paradise Engine untapping blue creatures sort of has the Tyvar effect, like you're saying. If we have blue creatures that we can tap over and over again, we can start doing some sweet stuff. We have the ability to win with the following combinations. So if we have a Paradox Engine Emry, if we have 2 Ambers anywhere, and an Unctus in play or in our hand or in the graveyard, we can win. So we can loop Ambers, and then we can play Unctus, and then now when we loop, we go through our entire deck, we make blue mana, and we win with our 1 Thassa's Oracle. Or if you have 2 Ambers anywhere and Reservoir anywhere with a Paradox Engine Emry, you make as much mana as you need to cast Reservoir, you cast your Ambers over and over again, you eventually gain 50 life and kill your opponent. Or if you have a Paradox Engine Emry and a Renowned Weaponsmith, if you have a Soul Guide Lantern anywhere, the mana from Renowned Weaponsmith can be used to play and activate Soul Guide Lantern over and over again. So you keep untapping your Emry and your Weaponsmith, you cast Soul Guide Lantern, you untap them both, you do it over and over again, you draw through your deck, and then you Thassa's Oracle your opponent. And we have the one of Etherflux Reservoir there as just like an Emryable win condition as opposed to Thassa's Oracle. That also beats Elish Norn for the handful of decks that play that. You don't have to worry about Thassa's Oracle getting shut off. And we do have like a one of Recommission as a card that finds Unctus if we need that to go off, can find Thassa's Oracle if we milled it or has been thought seized, or, you know, whatever. Finds whatever, every creature. It can find an Ingenious Smith for a value play.
So we're maxing out on Paradox Engines because we have these Renowned Weaponsmiths to just cast them so easily. I mean, again, we keep coming back to Weaponsmith as like a hidden power card, and I think you're absolutely right to just keep pushing on this space. One little detail, I think this may finally be a deck where Glint Nest Crane is just straight up better than Ingenious Smith, because I don't think you're ever going to kill them with damage here, and the Crane being blue I think matters a lot for Unctus. It's just like an extra looter that can just attack every turn.
Yeah, that might be true. That might be true. My concern is that Ingenious Smith actually becomes a reasonable blocker, but maybe that doesn't matter. I guess the Crane actually has 4 toughness with an Unctus in play, so maybe it is just better. That's a good point. I don't even think about it because just in my mind it's just it's worse than Smith, which 99% of the time it is.
Yeah, I think Crane's like sort of okay with Unctus. Remains to be seen, but in a combo show like this, yeah, let's definitely try the Cranes first.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So the other way to combo with Unctus, and you've outlined some alternative combo routes, right? Like this one you're describing is kind of the known get a Paradox Engine in play and then do something with, you know, Emry or whatever over and over again. But there is this other route to combo, specifically with Kiora's Follower if we're in Pioneer, or Fatestitcher if you're in Modern. So walk me through what you're thinking in this combo space.
So if you have 2 Kiora's Followers and an Unctus, and I realize that's asking a lot, the Kiora's Followers can untap themselves over and over again, and then you eventually find, again, Thassa's Oracle is going to be your win condition. I would probably want to play Tyvar in this deck because it helps find Kiora's Follower, and it gives them haste, so it lets you do a full... It's a turn and a half faster. You could even play the blue creature that Lotus Field plays as an extra untap source. It's 2 and a blue for a 1/3 that untaps any permanent. It can also cycle to untap.
Oh, that untaps any permanent? The Vizier of Tumbling Sands?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'd play 4 of those, 4 Kiora's Follower, 4 Unctus, 4 Tyvar. Whatever else you want to play beyond that is between you and your Lord and Savior. 4 Thassa's Oracle.
Yeah, I have I have some suggestions there. I'm thinking that you're also on your way to just being a Vannifar deck, which works with Tyvar very nicely. A Corridor Monitor is like pretty good with Unctus too. So like maybe Vannifar is like your alternate branch of the combo, which can either assemble the Kiora's Follower Unctus combo or it does its own Vannifar tree. Like if that makes sense.
Yeah, but what does the Vannifar tree do? Because the Vannifar tree, the actual combo that does like 20 damage in Pioneer takes a ton of slots and a whole nother color.
Well, okay, so you could build it so that all it does is support the Unctus combo. So it finds like a Glasspool Mimic and a Kiora's Follower, for example. So there's your two followers, and you need to have Tyvar in play, so it's not totally solved yet.
I mean, I could see putting like a couple Kioras in, or a couple of the 4-drop in there. The problem is it like kills your 2-drop to find your 3-drop. So it doesn't actually like help you assemble the combo because you don't have any other like ways. Like if I kill my Kiora's Follower to get my 3-drop, my Unctus, it's like, all right, well now I'm missing my 2-drop.
Well, you have to get the Extraction Specialist.
It can't add creatures to play. All it can do is turn one creature into another creature. It doesn't ever add another creature to play.
Well, if you have Extraction Specialist, it does.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. So we're adding a whole 4th color for this free edition.
Okay, I haven't solved it yet. That's the riddle.
Yeah, I don't have a deck in front of me, and it might be that the path you're going down, and maybe you just need like 2 Kiora's Followers and Tyvar, and you don't need the whole rest of the combo is not actually that needed. But I would at least start with like 8 untap effects, maybe like 4 Thoughtseize, and maybe like a couple of Treasure Cruises or something, just to like give you a bunch of value because all your creatures don't do anything. But yeah, you have the ability to just like loop all these untap effects through your deck, and maybe at the end of all that, you can Thassa's Oracle your opponent.
All right, so that's a Kiora's Follower Unctus combo.
All right.
You highlight the Locust God next.
Yes, okay, so Locust God says whenever you draw a card, create a 1/1 blue, and red insect token. So, if you have Unctus in play, and you play the Lotus God, if you have a way to tap the Lotus God, let's say a vehicle with crew 1, you tap the god to crew the thing, it triggers Unctus, so you loot and draw, you make a 1/1, the 1/1 can crew the vehicle in response. So you can make an infinite amount of 1/1s, you can choose to draw through your deck, and you can make, whatever, you have 40 cards left in your deck, you can make 38 1/1 flying, or they insects.
Wait, so these are blue? These are blue insects?
Yeah, blue and red insects.
I did not realize that.
So yeah, you end up with, whatever, minus a couple cards left in your deck to give you some whatever. If you want to find a Thassa's Oracle in the middle of all that, you could probably find one of those too. On your next turn, you draw, there's 1 card left in your deck, you have a Thassa's Oracle in your hand, you attack your opponent with 30 insects. If they somehow have a sweeper or something, okay, and then you win with Thassa's Oracle, or if they don't have a sweeper, you kill them with damage. So again, here I like Omen Keel. We talked about it before. It's an easy card to crew. It's very powerful on curve. It does help you hit a bunch of lands. Lotus God is 6 mana. I'm not sure if you'd play ramp effects in a shell like this, or maybe you just have a couple Lotus Gods in there and just hope to hit it throughout the natural course of play. I don't really know what that shell would look like, but that is a combo that you can do, that you can execute.
Yeah, I'm like, Unctus and Locust God are both legends, so maybe I'm in Modern, I'm going to Gorios these, and my vehicle's a Smuggler's Copter. It's probably not a good idea, but it'd be so sweet.
I do want to point out that Lotus God this also gets around Fatal Push. So you can, when you crew Omen Keel, that's an activated ability. The Omen Keel is not yet crewed. You just paid the cost. So the trigger happens first. You get your 1/1, and then so if you hold down Shift, you can crew everything in response to everything. Oh. So you can get all your tokens. Let's say you play Lotus God, you pass your opponent during their upkeep. You make 30 1/1s or whatever, and you find your Oracle to hand, and then so they have to have a sweeper and a Thoughtseize to stop you, or whatever. You can make 20 during their upkeep to make sure you have enough power, and then they pass. If they sweep, you can whatever. So yeah, they can't stop you with the Fatal Push. Obviously, if they can trigger Fatal Push, they can just kill your Unctus, but you at least can dodge the unkicked Fatal Push.
All right, so those are some advanced combos we can attempt. I have 2 more Pioneer lists I want to propose, and I'll just mention a couple things that you could do in Modern. Unctus is so cool. Freaking love this card. So forget about infinite combos. Can I interest you, David, in Death's Shadow in Pioneer?
Yes, you can. I love the look of this list. Walk us through it.
All right, so people keep casting Shadow of Mortality against me in Modern. This is the 15 drop that can be cast for as little as black if you are at 7 life or lower. And they're doing that for weird reasons, for Calibrated Blast Modern reasons. But it's like a sort of okay card in play, 7/7. Not good enough in Modern, but maybe that's good enough in Pioneer. I talked about this Neoform Atraxa deck that I've been messing with. There, a 7/7 backed up by a Stubborn Denial is very, very good. So, like, what if Shadow of Mortality is, like, actually okay in Pioneer if it makes the Stubborn Denial a real card? How can you reliably get your life down low enough? Well, we suddenly have a way that did not exist before. Unctus can just activate its Phyrexian mana ability over and over again. It can actually target itself. You don't need another creature in play. You can just go from 20 to 6 in one shot. It's sorcery speed, so they can stop you if they realize that something is up. But they probably won't stop you. And then your Shadow of Mortality is unlocked. You can also play Scourge of the Skyclaves. Scourge does require you to hit the opponent for something, so that's the tricky part. You do have to deal with some damage to them before Scourge can come down. But they might shock themselves, or you can get a hit in with another 1-drop or 2-drop. So I have some supporting cards to make the Scourge a little bit more reliable. Specifically, I have Knight of the Ebon Legion. Great card in Vampire's deck. Just a good overstated card in general. Follow that up with a Thoughtseize and a Shockland, and you're growing your Knight. I have Evangel of Synthesis. This card has that draw 2 trigger, so if you play like Evangel on turn 2, loot a card, sure. Next turn, play your Unctus. When you attack with the Evangel, you will loot. You will draw a second card, so the Evangel will get a bonus. It will have Menace. You can pump it before you do that with the Unctus, so you're actually getting your life total down, and you're just hitting for big chunks of damage. So the Evangel is actually pretty impressive. It's just like a card without a home, we might say. So 4 Evangel, 4 Knight of the Ebon Legion, 4 Scourge of the Skyclave, 4 Shadow Mortality, Thoughtseize, Fatal Push, and Stubborn Denial. So I'm actually pretty low to the ground. I have 4 Unctus, and kind of the missing last pieces are 2 copies of Demonic Embrace. Demonic Embrace is an aura that you can cast from your graveyard by discarding a card and paying 3 life. It gives your creature +3/+1. So this will, it's kind of like the Temur Battle Rage slot, but it's a card you could like loot away with an Evangel or with an Unctus. 2 Scrap Heap Scroungers. I'm not sure if this is actually a good use of slots, but again, this just hits pretty hard with Unctus and is like kind of free. Some speculative cards that I'm considering are a Singleton Font of Agonies. This is a weird one, David. Do you know this card?
I know it because you mentioned it when we were talking about this a while ago. It gains counters every time you pay life.
Right.
And you have a few cards that require that Iron Price. And then you remove 4 blood counters from it to destroy target creature.
Yeah, so it's an interesting control effect.
Yes. Yeah, I like what I'm seeing here.
Yeah, it might be like too unreliable. Like the Scourge of the Skyclaves in particular is the one that I'm worried about. But I don't know. It'd be a fun thing to try, and just like something that I didn't think was possible in Pioneer, but I now think it might be possible.
Yeah, I think my one instinct here is to actually not play that many Stubborn Denials. I don't like playing counter magic with Thoughtseize. I would maybe like max out on your Scrap Heap Scroungers and even consider the mechanic to go with your Evangel Unctus.
Oh, really? Okay.
Just so you can go like 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop more often. I don't think Stubborn Denial is that useful if you're going to be Thoughtseizing. Like in general, you end up not playing a lot of those same effects. As far as like how good Scourge is or Shadow, I think you really want to be able to like play a 2-drop so that your Scourge is at least castable. Like once it's in play, because you're going to do so much damage to them and so much damage to yourself, it'll be fine. I think you just want to be able to play your Scourge on 3 like a reasonable amount of the time if that's your 3-drop.
So maybe I need like another 2-drop. I was thinking like, should we splash white? Because if you splash white, you get Skrelv, very good with big creatures, very good with Unctus. You also get a Danto Vanguard, which is another part of this, pay as much life as you want plan. Every 4 life, that's a Font of Agonies trigger that turns on Knight by itself, Knight of the Ebon Legion, I should say. So like to the extent that Death Shadow is like a historic deck, for example, like that's a key card as a Danto Vanguard. So that's another direction you could go. The mana starts to get a little iffy there.
Yeah, Unctus is double blue, and we need black on turn 1, and then we need blue on turn 3. So I don't know how feasible adding white is. I suspect it's going to involve a lot of rainbow lands that hit you every time you tap them if you try it. And then maybe you're still okay because you do want to hurt yourself. But I think this deck seems pretty stable right now. I don't know that I would play like Font of Agonies. I think I just really focus on being like a beatdown deck that has the ability to just play Shadow, which dominates combat.
Okay.
Without like the combo. I mean, I'd still keep the 2 Demonic Embraces, or at least one, as a card you can just like loot to fly over to do the last bits of damage. But I actually think just like Scrap Heap Scrounger on 2 Unctus, make it blue, do 4 to them is like a reasonable curve. I do think Evangel is actually going to be insane in this deck. It's just 4 damage unblockable if Unctus is in play forever. So like you could imagine like Evangel into Unctus, you take 2, you do 4 to them, and now you can play Scourge, do as much damage to yourself as you like, and you're hitting them for at least another 4. Like Scourge becomes huge.
Right. Yeah, it sounds sweet. I'm a little bit worried that if we don't draw Unctus, we don't do any of this, but the concept is there at least. All right, so from there, one last list that I do think is worth exploring, and this is actually a very, very basic idea. What if we just play like Blue Skies, with or without ninjas? What do I mean by that? Well, it turns out that if you just want creatures that benefit immediately from both of Unctus's Lord effects, you want cheap artifacts that are also blue. And there are 2 of them. There's Silver Raven, which is a 1/1 flying creature that scries 1, and Network Disruptor, 1/1 flyer that taps any permanent when it comes into play. I already mentioned how I think that's a sweet card with Unctus. You can just tap itself to get an extra loot if you need to, but more importantly, it just keeps pushing damage. It messes with their mana. It makes it very impossible for them to block. And if you are going to say ninjutsu the Network Disruptor back to your hand a bunch of times, I'm imagining that they just can never block. What's the rest of the deck? Well, I think you need more ones, so I'm proposing 4 Combat Couriers and 4 Moon Circuit Hacker, which is unfortunately not an artifact. This is the...
Oh, it's an enchantment.
It's an enchantment. This is the Pioneer version of Ninja of the Deep Hours. A couple of Covert Technician. This is another weird ninja that actually is an artifact. And I think it's actually kind of good with Unctus.
I actually think this card is awesome. This is an awesome card to find. I've been looking at this card a lot. And I'm always like, there's not like a reasonable lore, but now we have it. I think I'd max out on these and try to find a way to like do something sweet with them.
So if you ninja this in on turn 2, you can immediately put in a 2-mana artifact. Unfortunately, the Omen Keel is not eligible for this because it's the backside of the MDFC. But I still would play. I think I would still play Omen Keel. I think it's just like a huge creature. And then maybe some combination of Scrap Heap Scroungers or Glitness Cranes or Chief Engineers. It's not totally clear to me what the rest of the creature suite looks like. And then, do you play Disruption? If so, it should probably be Metallic Rebuke. Just like assume you're going to win in the air, kind of like a Spirits deck, with the occasional Metallic Rebuke. But you can just loot a bunch of times between Moon Circuit Hacker and Unctus. That's the idea.
So one of the things I was thinking about, this is an interesting deck. I like a lot of the cards. I don't, obviously I get nervous about playing like Silver Raven, Network Disruptor. You love stuff like this. But I think like as a full on synergy piece, I think they make a ton of sense. I would look at maybe playing the 4 mana, blue black Planeswalker that can activate twice if it blinks something. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, the new Kaito Shizuki?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So I'd like load up on the Covert Technicians, and in theory what I'm imagining is Kaito Suzuki's first ability makes it so they can't block or whatever. Or whatever. We play our let me look this up here. Network Disruptor. Yes. We tap their creature. So then Kaito Suzuki says they can't block. So whatever, we neutralize 2 creatures. Then we hit them with our ninja or ninja something in, and then Kaito blinks the thing we just played, the Network Disruptor or whatever, and then it gets to activate again. It gets to drain or draw a card or whatever the other thing is. And then we're like net positive because we're constantly getting to play these artifacts for free. Like if we're bouncing a Silver Raven each time, we're replaying it with the the ninja. So we don't lose the tempo that we normally would, because I think you can stack your triggers, right? You bounce a creature and then you play something from your hand.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You end up not losing. So you get to trigger your Planeswalker twice, which is key. And the first ability we're going to activate every turn to make sure we can keep hitting with our ninja. And then I think it makes like a 2/2 that if it dies, drains for 2. And I think it draws a card, are your options. I can't remember.
Drains 2. Yeah, that's the drone artifact creature token. Okay, this is Kaito Dancing Shadow.
Yeah, and okay, and then that's an artifact, exactly. So it makes an artifact, is my point, for Unctus.
Okay, yeah, maybe this is the missing piece, because I like the idea of Covert Technician, but I hadn't quite put together what I was doing with it that makes use of the trigger every turn. I love how the Covert Technician is actually really hard to kill, right? It's got huge toughness, natural 2/4, right. Natural 3 CMC. It's like very hard to kill this card.
Right.
So once it's doing its thing.
So it's hard to kill, and then with the Planeswalker, and if it's being buffed by Unctus, it's just actually big, right? It's 3/4 or 3/5.
Yeah, it attacks as a 3/5 that loots every time it attacks. Like,
yeah. So yeah, that'd be my thought process, is something like that, like some number of the 4 mana Planeswalker.
Okay, I'm into it.
As a card that has interesting synergy with the artifact ninja, like replaying the artifact. So your net loss is 0. You're not losing any tempo. You're playing the card for free.
Yeah, that's sick. Okay, I'm excited to mess around with that more.
But like, I wouldn't play Chief Engineer in this shell. We don't have artifacts we want to play. Like, that's a card I would maybe like cut the first one of. We'd have to look at it. I mean, I don't like Emry in this list. I'll just say that. Like, but
okay, yeah, I see what you mean. I think that going for Kaito pushes us towards like a different direction that makes a lot of sense.
But yeah, just something to think about, because I've thought a lot about that artifact card, and as soon as I didn't think of it, I certainly didn't propose it. But then you were like, oh, Unctus pushes the power. I was like, wow, is there a 3 mana artifact we can like cheat into play? That's interesting. Does it let us play prototype cards?
I actually don't know. I don't know if it does. I have to check on this.
Because again, one of the things we found is the black prototype is interesting if you have a way to push its power. Unctus pumps it 1, so it's like weirdly better, and that card has menace. Just another card to consider. Like it's function unblockable.
Right. Gosh.
Anyway, just thinking out loud.
I freaking love this card. Unctus is sweet.
But maybe just 4 Scrap Heap Scrounger, honestly. It's just so good.
Yeah. Okay. So those are all Pioneer concepts. I do want to just mention for the Modern fans, this card is actually potentially very good in Modern. Talking about Unctus again. Aspiring Spike has played 2 very sweet Unctus shells, and they're using the same types of synergies we're talking about. But in Modern, you get access to Riddlesmith, which kind of doubles your Unctus looting effect, right? Riddlesmith lets you loot every time. What is it? You cast an artifact, or is it when
you cast an artifact spell, you draw a card. If you do, you may draw a card. If you do, you discard a card.
Right. So now that you have a lot of access to that effect between Unctus and Riddlesmith, you can be a lot more confident about Ovalchase Daredevil, which is a very good card in Modern with Underworld Cookbook. So those 3 cards are like kind of core to a lot of what Spike is proposing in these Unctus shells. One of them is an affinity shell. So just trying to like get on the board, just get huge value with Riddlesmith and Ovalchase Daredevil and Unctus looting away as you fill up the board with Mem Knights and Ornithopters, Emry's here, Thought Monitors here, and of course Urza Saga to turn this all into a win. And 3 Smuggler's Copter. If you love Smuggler's Copter, I mean, this is a sweet way to play them. The other one is less focused on beatdown. He's saying, okay, well, Kiora's Follower is fine for Pioneer, but you get a much, much more powerful version in Modern called Fatestitcher. 4 mana zombie wizard, but it unearths for just a single blue. It unearths with haste. All you need is 2 Fatestitchers, and they can just keep tapping to untap the other one. So they're blue, so they're naturally blue for Unctus. Yeah, I'm a natural blue. And then you loot through your deck. And Thassa's Oracle probably finishes things in this shell, as it always does. So I think he's iterated on this a couple times, sometimes with Mesmeric Orb, sometimes without. Because again, you do have to find that second Fatestitcher. It takes a little while, but once Unctus is down, it just wins immediately for the most part.
And because it can be played out of your graveyard, the Unctus Mesmeric Orb is almost like, it's not a tutor, but it really rips through your deck. I mean, you're going to see the top 25, 30, 40 cards real fast.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Emry is good here. I mean, they kind of have to kill Emry, so it digs you 4 while doing all that. It digs you towards Fatestitchers and Ovalchase Daredevils. So, yeah, that Daredevil is like intriguing because it is Pioneer legal, and that's like another angle that we're not proposing it this week, but you could just say, okay, I want to do Chief Engineer, Ovalchase Daredevil, and Unctus, and just like see where that takes me in either format, to be honest. So yeah, this is potentially a very good card in Modern as well. We're not going to go into detail on it more now, but I'll direct you to these aspiring Spike Leagues.
Yeah, I will say the one reason that Ovalchase Daredevil isn't as intriguing in Pioneer is there is a land in Modern, Urza Saga. I won't tell you what set it's from, but you can guess. That just converts a bunch of artifacts in play, no matter how bad, into a win. It just gives you 2 giant creatures uncounterable, and each one of them does it. And it tutors up another artifact. So without the ability to do that, a bunch of artifacts in play and a bunch of cards from all your looting with Ovalchase Daredevil is much harder to convert to a win in Pioneer. I'm not saying it's impossible, but you just have to do a lot more work. You have to like play 4 mana Karn. That's not a good card, like et cetera, et cetera. You have to do a little bit more work than just play a land uncounterably and then turn it into 2 10/10s and then and a tutor.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, so stick with Modern for the Ovalchase Daredevil.
And we have, I've proposed one. You had a couple in your ninja list. Like, it's a card you should at least just have one of, I think. As you're flying through your deck, it can turn into something, especially if you can play it. Because again, Unctus can turn into an artifact that can tap. If you have something that's granting haste to artifacts, it can just all of a sudden get in there for 5. But if you can't make black, I don't think it's actually useful in Pioneer in the way that it is, where you just loot it away for free.
Yeah. All right, so, I mean, we've talked for an hour about Unctus. I think the card is sweet. I thought it was sweet. Now I think it's even sweeter. I mean, just hearing some of the ways that you're finding these synergies, I'm really excited for this card.
Yeah, and honestly, I think this is the card we'll like keep coming back to because, like I said, I don't know which one of these lists will be good or bad. Even like in each of the lists, you're proposing 5 cards, I'm proposing 5 cards. We don't know if we're right or wrong. I mean, basically no one's played Unctus and Pioneer, so we're just like doing the work in real time. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think there's just so much room to explore, to see what's good, to see what's bad, to tweak, to improve the list. Then you can kind of metagame again because you can often loot through a bunch of your deck. You can actually find your hate pieces and for certain matchups, maybe. So yeah, I think it's just a super rich card. It's a super deep card, and I think it's probably something that we'll keep tooling around with as long as some of these lists show promise for weeks and weeks.
Yeah, Unctus is so sweet. It's almost a bummer to like shift from that to talk about the dragon. I don't know, David. Should we talk about these dragon decks, or should we just save them for another time?
I think we should wait till next week. I mean, we're already at an hour 10 here.
Yeah. All right. So let's just call it here. We did test some Capricious Hellraiser. Details are in the notes. They were not successful leagues. I'll just say that right now. But we'll follow up on those in a future time because I think I want to end on a high note with Unctus.
There it is. Yes.
All right.
So the point is Unctus is sweet. There's a million things you can do with it. Even just, I mean, we're going to propose like 8 lists. We're just scratching the surface of what you can do with it. There's a bunch of cards that uniquely interacts with and go forth and be, productive here.
Exactly. All right, David. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks. See you next time.
All right. Take care.
Deck lists for this episode can be found at our homepage, faithlessbrewing.com. And tune in next time as we kick off previews for March of the Machine. Support for this podcast is provided by brewers like you. Join the Faithless family and help support the show at patreon.com/faithlessbrewing for Discord access, bonus content, and more. That's all for today. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.